My name is Brandis Ricciardi, and I am the Associate Director of the Counseling and Student Development Center. This year, the CSDC is proud to partner with the Marywood Pacers to host a presentation focusing on sexual assault and bystander engagement. Division III Week is a positive opportunity for our community to observe and celebrate the impact of athletics and student athletes on the campus and the surrounding community. Student athletes and students alike remain committed to our core values and share in the responsibility for a safe community. In this way, we manifest Marywood University's pursuit of the highest achievement in support of holiness, knowledge, and health. This presentation recognizes all members of our campus community as collaborative partners in the cultivation of campus health and well-being. It demonstrates the versatility of bystander intervention as a strategy that can be used to address a variety of campus issues. Our program draws upon a well-studied pro-social intervention theory, which suggests 7 steps for successfully intervening in problematic situations and encourages each of us to successfully navigate these steps in an authentic fashion, utilizing a variety of personal strategies. During this presentation, a few of our student clinicians at the CSDC will be speaking about healthy relationships, the definition of consent, resources available on campus and in the community, and steps and strategies for engagement. As we present this video, I would invite you to think about a time where you felt that a situation was challenging and how you felt about your response to it. Could have been maybe a friend or an ongoing problem, a sudden incident that perhaps you witnessed, or maybe something else. Think about how you felt in that situation and how you now feel about your responses. Most, if not all of us, can think of a time when we did not intervene. Thinking about it now may leave us feeling perhaps a bit uncomfortable, maybe a little guilty, or maybe feeling even a little bit ashamed. This program can help all of us use those uncomfortable feelings as motivation to learn how to respond in ways that are more in line with our values. When we think of our Marywood pride, let's lean on the values that we stand for, and let's remain strong, unified, and a supportive community.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what do healthy relationships look like and what do unhealthy relationships look like. What are the certain components that make up each that we could better serve ourselves and be in healthy, fulfilling, respectful relationships, and be aware of what the warning signs are for the unhealthy relationships? Now let's talk about this a little bit more. How healthy is your relationship? When we're talking about a healthy relationship, we're going to be looking at a few different things. We're going to be looking at communication, respect, disagreement, values, and trust. Communication. So let's talk a little bit about what healthy communication is going to look like. Healthy communication is when you feel safe to talk about how you're feeling. It helps to deliver the message to your partner and helps to be received by your partner. If your partner does something that upsets you, talk to them about it rather than holding it in or waiting until there's a big list and telling them all at once. Your partner won't know how you feel unless you talk about it. And if they care for you, they would want you to tell them your concerns. Something to be aware of is unhealthy communication. And what that might look like is feeling awkward about saying how you feel. Sometimes it's okay to feel awkward, but how do you act when you're feeling awkward? Are you moving toward or away from healthy communication? Lastly, let's look at abusive communication, which is being afraid to say how you feel because you fear being put down, harmed, or even threatened. Let's emphasize here, you have the right to feel safe, valued, and cared about in your relationship. And that doesn't stop with communication. Respect. When we're looking at what healthy respect looks like, it's when you are listened to regardless of differences in opinions. Is it possible to have conflicting ideas and still have respect for each other? And how do we do that? The first step is to open ourselves to actively listening to the other person, understanding that it's okay to have differences. differences in opinions, and difference in values. When we're looking at unhealthy respect, something to look out for is when you're feeling ignored or your opinions aren't considered. Are you feeling respected when your opinions are dismissed or you're feeling invalidated? When speaking to abusive respect, it's when you're feeling you are disrespected and your ideas and feelings are treated with contempt. This is something that we should look out for so we can move toward a healthier version of what respect will look like. Disagreement. Healthy disagreement is when you can have disagreement and still talk respectively to each other. Even in a respectful relationship, you're going to come across disagreements and arguments. Conflict is normal and it's healthy, and it can help you learn about and understand one another. It can be unpleasant. It can elicit feelings of sadness, guilt, confusion, or even anger, though it's important to deal with conflict when it arises. And it's how you manage your differences and come to solutions that are important in maintaining a respectful relationship. Something to be on the lookout for is unhealthy disagreement, when your disagreements turn into fights too often. This might happen when we're not able to regulate our emotions as best as we can to recognize the differences that exist in one another. Abusive disagreement is when you're afraid to disagree because you do not want to run the risk of influencing your partner to become violent and/or angry. This is something that we want to address because this may be manipulative and may be affecting the health of your overall relationship. Values. Healthy values are when both partners can be honest concerning their values. Being open and learning about new things can help you understand your partner and increase the overall health of your relationship. Unhealthy values is when you feel embarrassed or uncomfortable discussing your values. This can turn abusive when your needs and wants are ignored and when you are pushed into situations that frighten or degrade you, or situations that go against your values. It is not healthy to pressure your partner to do something they don't want to do, nor is it healthy to put pressure on yourself to do something that you're not comfortable with. Trust. Trust is going to be an important factor of a healthy relationship. When you trust each other and are comfortable with your partner, spending time with other people is all right. We feel okay about that. When it starts to border on unhealthy, we might feel jealous every time our partner or our friend talks to another person. And this is a warning sign for what we should look out for before it leads to abusive trust. When you might be accused of flirting all the time or accused of not being concerned about your partner's or friend's feelings in order not to talk to other people or friends. We are social creatures, and we have to be able to be around other people and feel trusted to do so in a healthy way.
What is consent? Consent is the active and positive exchange on words of actions that indicate willingness to participate freely and voluntarily in a mutual sexual engagement. When do we need consent? First time, every time, all the time. Consent is an ongoing thing that continues, and no matter where you are and what's going on, it'll continue on. Consent is clear, consent is active. It's expressed through words or actions that create mutually understandable permission. Consent is never implied, and the absence of no is not a yes. Silence is not consent. I'm not sure, I don't know, maybe, and similar phrases are also not consent. Consent is coherent. People under the influence by drugs or alcohol cannot consent. Someone who cannot make rational, reasonable decisions because he or she lacks the capacity to understand the who, what, when, where, why, or how of the situation cannot consent. People who are asleep or in another vulnerable position cannot consent. Consent is never given under pressure. Consent is not obtained through psychological or emotional manipulation. Consent cannot be obtained through physical violence or threat. Someone in an unbalanced power situation or someone under your authority cannot consent. Consent is ongoing. It must be granted every time. Consent must be obtained at each step of physical intimacy. If someone consents to one sexual activity, he or she may or may not be willing to go further. As stated before, consent cannot be given if one is physically or mentally incapacitated by alcohol or other drugs. It also can't be given if one is unconscious, if one is asleep, and if one is under the age of consent, which is 16 in the state of Pennsylvania. Signs of non-consent are verbal refusal, implied refusal, and physical resistance.
What is sexual harassment? Sexual harassment is unwelcome sexual or gender-based behaviors that creates an environment that would be reasonably perceived by the complainant as hostile or abusive. Sexual assault is the most serious form of harassment. Examples of this can be acts of aggression, intimidation, hostility, either verbal or nonverbal, graphic or physical. Marywood's policy states sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other conduct of sexual nature constitute sexual harassment when such advances, requests imply that one's response may affect academic or personal decisions, such speech or conduct is directed against another and is abusive or severely humiliating, such speech is regarded as offensive and substantially impairs the academic or work opportunity of students, colleagues, or coworkers. In the teaching context, it must also be severe, pervasive, and not related to subject matter. Sexual misconduct. Under the term sexual misconduct includes sexual and gender-based harassment, sexual assault, dating and domestic violence, sexual exploitation, and stalking. So sexual misconduct is conduct that exploits another person in a sexual or non-consensual way. This can include, but is not limited to, kissing, touching, fondling, non-consensual voyeurism, non-consensual recording, non-consensual dissemination of the recordings, allowing others to view sexual activities without the consent of the participants, and exposure of one's body in a lewd or indecent manner, and sexual activity in a public or semi-public place. In the US, more than 20% of women will be sexually assaulted during their time at college. 11.3% of college students will experience some form of sexual assault or rape. 19 to 27% of college women and 6 to 8% of college men are sexually assaulted while in college. And more than 50% of college sexual assaults occur in August, September, October, and November, and are at highest risk during the student's first and second semester. Sexual assault is defined as any non-consensual attempted or completed sexual intercourse. This can include oral, anal, or vaginal penetration, however slight, with a body part and/or object. And at Marywood, this is defined as threats or deliberate physical contact of a sexual nature that is against another person's will or without consent. 85 to 90% of sexual assaults reported by college students involve alcohol use by one or both of the parties. So let's talk a little bit about drug and alcohol facilitated sexual assault. Incapacitated people cannot give consent. Substances are not the cause of sexual assault. Sexual experiences under the influence of any substances is always risky. And common date rape drugs include rohypnol, GHB, and ketamine. Some things that you can do to help keep yourself safe might include telling people where you're going, traveling in groups when possible, not letting your drinks be alone, and not letting your drinks come from strangers. Sexual assault is never the fault of the person who experiences it. This is true if the person's wearing revealing clothes, flirting, drinking alcohol, said no, but then said yes, and then said no. This is also true if it's a close friend, a roommate, an intimate partner, someone that you've known for a while. It is never the fault of the person who experiences it. Okay, so now we'll talk a little bit about the differences between confidential versus private resources. Confidential resources means that the resource does not have the duty to report an act of sexual misconduct. These confidential resources include the Counseling Student Development Center here at Marywood, the Student Health Services, Women's Resource Center of Lackawanna County, and the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Priests in their pastoral duties also fall under confidential resources. However, nuns on campus do not fall under confidential resources. In terms of the Counseling Student Development Center, counselors fall under a confidential resource as long as they're in their counselor role. On the other side of this, private resources do have a duty to report an act of sexual misconduct. This includes Marywood Campus Safety Department, Campus Ministry, and Office of Disability Services. In this instance, RAs, RDs, professors, university faculty, and coaches fall under private resources. Lastly, medical resources. These include Geisinger Community Medical Center, the Regional Hospital of Scranton, and Moses Taylor Hospital.
On March 13, 1964, 28-year-old Kitty Genovese was returning home from her job at a local bar. It was 3:15 a.m. Kitty parked her car and began to walk less than 100 feet to her apartment at 29 St. John's Place in West Brooklyn, New York. As she walked, she was approached by a man wielding a hunting knife. Kitty Genovese was stabbed twice in the back while screaming, "Oh my God, he stabbed me! Help me!" Several other tenants heard her yells. No one had to come down the stairs to help. Kitty dragged herself to the rear entrance of the building, seriously injured and out of sight. 10 minutes later, her attacker returned. He tracked her to the apartment hallway where he brutally stabbed, raped, and robbed Kitty, who was barely clinging to her life. For half an hour, Kitty endured brutal violence at the hands of her attacker. She was eventually found by a neighbor in the hall of her apartment complex. Kitty's story has become viral. It's studied in psychology, criminology, and social work classes. It is a story that leaves us asking, how could so many people know but not help? How could all of these bystanders just allow this to happen? From Kitty's story, we've learned what it means to be a bystander, what it means to intervene, and the importance of the bystander engagement. The bystander engagement effect is a tendency for people in a group to not help when others are around. Everyone is paralyzed into inaction as they're thinking, oh, someone else is going to help. So for instance, with a car accident, everyone drives by as if feeling that they're anonymous and assume that someone else will take responsibility. Even fewer people stop when they see that someone has already stopped to assist, when the person who did stop may not have the proper training, a cell phone, or any other necessary tools or skills.
We are going to explore what it might mean to intervene when someone's in a difficult situation or may even be in danger. As students, there are times when you see something that doesn't seem quite right. It might be obvious or it might be subtle. Sometimes intervening is simple, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's more challenging. You may feel a little awkward, but it doesn't mean it's not working. Your actions still have an impact, whether in the moment or down the road. We are going to watch 3 distinct scenarios in the film Intervene. The next part of your training will be to view the film attached with the email sent to you with this presentation. As you watch, please pay attention to how the characters interact with each other, as well as how the scenarios are similar and different from one another. Particularly, we will be discussing scenarios 1, 5, and 6. The 7 steps of an effective bystander intervention are outlined on the slide attached. The first, recognizing behavior, which will correspond to the first video. The second, interpreting behavior as a problem. Third, feel a sense of responsibility. Fourth, knowing what to do or not do. Fifth, feel you have the ability to take action. Sixth, perform a quick cost-benefit analysis. And 7 is act, be it directly, distracting, delegating, or discussing. The scenarios that you will view are based on real experiences of undergraduate, graduate, and professional students. Some of these situations occur with greater frequency than others. Like many on our campus, you may have witnessed, directly experienced, or intervened in one or more of these types of situations.